Last time on the WizardCast.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the WizardCast, the only news podcast that matters. If you're not listening to the WizardCast, then folks, you're being lied to. That's all there is to it. Brought to you by, of course, by WizPro Protein Shakes, guaranteed to make you feel less inadequate. Folks, it's time to get serious. The evidence is mounting, and I mean, you have to be blind not to see it. If something isn't done, it's only a matter of time until our Salesforce way of life as we know it vanishes forever. It will affect our children, and our children's children. I mean, I love children. I don't know about you. I think anyone who willfully ignores this is going on must hate children. Like, actually think that children are trash. Not you, though, dear listener. Not you. You love children, don't you? That's why you're here with us. Right here. Now, I'm talking, of course, about the fact that there is a cabal of lizard people who are secretly running Salesforce, silently amassing more and more power even as we speak. I don't know if Mark or Parker knows about this, but just take a look at this picture of Charlie Isaacs. Look at it! This is the face of a man who knows!
All right. That's it. I'm shutting this down.
What? You can't! The people need to hear the truth. My truth!
Brian, you need help. You aren't a morning DJ or a late night talk show host or a conspiracy nut job, whatever loser nonsense this is.
Okay, I see.
Yeah? You got it?
Oh, yeah.
You got it?
I get it. I get that they got to you. The lizard people got to you, didn't they? What did they threaten, Mark? Your job? Your family? Your personal developer org?
All right, that's enough.
Hey, no. Hey, no, that's my files. Hey, that's my picture, Charlie Isaacs.
And now the conclusion of the WizardCast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create WizardCast.
We've got tips and best practices.
We talk with interesting people.
All mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome to the WizardCast. My therapist gave me a book on narcissism to read, but it wasn't about me, so I didn't bother to read it.
And that's why I had him hypnotize you and read it to you while you couldn't do anything about it.
What?
Nothing.
Well, we have some important announcements to make this episode.
Indeed we do. We do have a couple. Yep.
Zombie pigs. The zombie apocalypse is nigh.
No. Here we go again. Brian, I think we might need to up your dosage.
No. I saw it on NPR, Mark. Scientists have reactivated brain cells in pigs 4 hours after it was slaughtered.
Yeah, okay. No, that is incredible. I saw the same article, and it actually has nothing to do with pigs being zombies. The brain didn't actually come back to life. It just had it was cellularly active. There was some activity, but the brain couldn't actually do or feel anything. Okay? It was a great leap in biological science. Getting oxygen back to the brain, it's great advancement for people who may have suffered from oxygen deprivation.
First, they came for the pigs, and I did nothing because I was not a pig. Then they came for the horses, and I did nothing because I was not a horse. Then they came for the monkeys, and I did nothing because I was not a monkey. Then they came for me, and
there was no one left to speak for you.
Brains.
Whoops, too much dosage. Okay, in all seriousness, we do have two pieces of actual news. Salesforce has made 2 new purchases.
Hot purchases, hot like jalapenos.
Jalapenos. Salesforce announced that they are going to be acquiring Map Anything. That's a big deal. And they're also acquiring, this affects me, Salesforce.org.
Well, Map Anything is pretty cool, and it's not too surprising considering the field service lightning map needs and everything else, but
Yep, that definitely is a big integration between those two.
Why acquire Salesforce.org? I thought it was Salesforce and just the nonprofit side.
Well, No. Okay. So I'm not authorized to talk a lot about this, so I'm not going to make a lot of attempts, but I can clear up a couple things, particularly that. Salesforce does not technically own Salesforce.org. Technically, Salesforce.org isn't a nonprofit either. Technically, it's a public benefit corporation, which means that it's basically for profit, but does actually provide some, of course, benefit to the public. And it is not owned by Salesforce. It's a separate entity. You have the same chairman. You still have Mark Benioff as the chairman of it. It's still technically a separate entity. So what this is doing is basically pulling .org actually under the Salesforce's wing.
It's interesting, but it still kind of seems like to me it's Salesforce paying Salesforce for more Salesforce.
I mean, kind of. It's not paying Salesforce for more Salesforce. It's just paying for more Salesforce.
Whoever Salesforce's account executive is brilliant.
Again, I can't go a whole lot into this. Suffice to say,
I know because of the lizard people. It's okay, Mark. It's okay.
Right. Suffice to say, there's a lot that is still being determined. Yeah. So look for more information on this in the future, and probably don't look for it from me because I'm not authorized to speak about it.
Right. But anything that we are going to talk about around this lines is going to be publicly posted. We will have links in the show notes regarding Salesforce acquiring Map Anything as well as .org. And, of course, the zombie pigs. Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk too much about Map Anything. I mean, to me, it's always been either GeoPoint or Map Anything in the mapping world when you're talking about Salesforce integration.
Well, there's definitely a lot of history there. Like, Map Anything was kind of the big dog on the block for a very long time. And there wasn't anybody to compete with them until GeoPoint came along, basically provided a relatively similar service and did it for like half the price.
Right.
And so it took this function, this feature that was kind of monopolized a little bit, and made it more accessible. And you're right, there is a huge amount of integration between Field Service Lightning and Map Anything. Map Anything's website actually advertises that it has specific services for Field Service Lightning. So this really is going to be very interesting. Yeah. Specifically, active truck routing or mapping. So you can actually see where any of your fleet is at any given time. Is something that Map Anything provides. And having that directly integrate with Field Service Lightning means that you can actually manage your routes in Field Service Lightning and see your fleet.
You know what would be really fun to do with something like Map Anything is like do a Dreamforce event where you can have icons that show where are all the mascots at a given point in time, or where's all the, who knows, some sort of like mapping game. Like we could put trackers on all the Salesforce MVPs or user group leaders, or product managers. Yes. We need to track her on Shannon Hale so I can follow her around with that boombox.
Brian, these are people who have lives and private business. They are not mascots at Disney World.
So we're not talking about them being like mascots, but let's face it. Does any Salesforce employee does any Salesforce employee have a life during Dreamforce?
I can't answer that one.
Lizard people. I understand.
Honestly, no. I honestly can't answer it because I don't know. I've never been an employee during Dreamforce.
I've talked to a few people who are basically saying, yeah, you just assume like the week before and the week during and the week after is going to be a blur, and
at least
you'll be
if not 4 weeks before.
And of course I think it largely depends on what you're doing, but I would imagine for people like product managers, they're busy as all heck because they got presentations, got meetings, they got doing all this other stuff. Yeah,
it's like the amount of work we've had to do, like when we've had like 5 or 6 or even 7 different things we've spoken for at Dreamforce, that's probably what they do every year.
Right. And then some. And, and a lot of them has to be up on the big stage. And all I'm saying,
they don't need you tracking them when they have such a busy freaking time of it already.
All I'm saying is it would make my job trying to play her theme song everywhere she goes a lot easier.
So you're saying it would be all right if you could do it?
Isn't that how it works for almost everything? It's wrong for everyone else but me.
Yeah, maybe we should cut to our interview now. All right, everybody. Today on the podcast, we have 2 guests. 2, count them 2, for the price of 1.
2.
Thank you, Brian. Joining us today, we have Jace Bryan and Corey O'Brien. They are both from Salesforce.org. Jace is they're both on the CCE team, which means customer centric engineering. What
CCE?
See, I just explained customer centric engineering, Brian.
Yeah, you explained what the abbreviation was. What is CCE?
Well, we'll come back to that, Brian. We'll talk about it. But essentially, they are open source community managers. Jace is he, him. Corey is she, her. Jace enjoys IPAs, spending time with his puppy, empowering unrepresented voices in the Salesforce ecosystem, and long walks on the beach. Corey didn't send me her bio, so I'm going to make it up entirely on the fly. Corey enjoys, she enjoys cereal. Specifically, it has to be the kind that has fake chocolate, those little fake chocolate puffs in it. If it doesn't have that, it's no good. She also likes petting cats, not her own. She doesn't have cats, or maybe she does. I don't know. This is completely off the cuff. But she enjoys petting cats that do not belong to her in any way, shape, or form. And she also likes Salesforce.
And based on the artwork behind her, she likes hypnotizing the random people who stop by her apartment.
It's very swirly.
Yeah, it's very swirly.
Mm-hmm.
What she's hypnotizing them to do, we may never find out.
Build more IKEA shelves by the look of it. That's the nearest thing I can figure out.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm going to have to send you my thing so you can insert the code.
Too late. It's recorded. It's in the bag.
It's in the bag. You were wrong on 100% of those things. I hate cereal, let alone chocolate cereal. I have a cat named Shinobi. He's the best cat. Yep, Shinobi. To be fair, I do love petting any animal. And my husband and friends and family think I will be mauled to death one day by some level of animal because I've tried to touch it. Yes, so.
We've kind of seen that. We've seen that on stand-ups before.
Corey O'Brien died tragically at a young age after being mauled by a heavily scented skunk.
Oh, God. Yeah, there's actually skunks in my yard on a fairly regular basis that we have to avoid. So let's hope it's not that.
I was going to say partially sedated bear, but you know.
Yes, and the pictures that you can see behind me, that is actually a zebra. It's a zebra, yeah.
I can see it. It's just a different angle, yeah.
Yeah, it's a zebra painted on a wood-like canvas. Yes, that fits my. When I started at .org last year, I had a spare room and hired my friend who is an interior designer to redo my room. So it's got all these beautiful things that the rest of my house does not look like. So this is the most beautiful room in the house. The rest of the house is not so well designed.
Yes.
Oh, are we show and telling? Here, I'll show and tell.
This is the audio format.
Yeah.
Yes, see. Well, Jace was holding up what I'm assuming was a stuffed fake dinosaur.
It's his
fake as in it's not an actual dinosaur that's completely non-species. And then Corey was holding up what looks like to be the remains of her last victim.
A googly-eyed frowny rock designed by my sister-in-law.
It's one of my favorite googly-eye rocks ever.
I don't know. It has a pretty stony expression.
Wah, wah.
Yes, this is what we get up to here in the WizardCast. All right, so let's start with Brian's confusion, his utter ignorance, and address first, what is the CCE?
Great question. CCE does stand for Customer Centric Engineering, and Jason and I work in the T&P or Tech and Products team inside Salesforce.org. And we have a team of 5 in total. Our director is Judy Sohn, who many in the nonprofit and education communities know. And we are a unique department within Salesforce.org where we sort of bridge the gap between, or we bridge the area between T&P and the developers, the doc writing team, the community of users, the community of partners and admins, and we sort of sit in the middle and make sure that what the community is talking about and what the community wants is sort of communicated over to the T&P team, and we lead with experience in the community and make sure that the T&P teams and the documentation teams have what they need to do with input from the community.
Corey, I do have a follow-up question. What's TMP? Is that like 4 letters short of TNT?
Tech and products.
Okay.
So the tech and products team. So the masterminds behind the nonprofit Success Pack software and a variety of other softwares that are developed by Salesforce.org for our community. We have EDA, formerly known as HEDA, and a variety of volunteers for Salesforce, and Jace can speak to some of the other educational ones, but we develop products for the nonprofit and educational community. And our department sort of, like I said, bridges the gap between the community and the ones designing and developing the products.
So what you're saying is you sit in between the customer and the engineers.
Yes, essentially. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we're a big team, and there's a lot of different people that do a lot of different roles. Our focus is on more of the open source side of things, because those products are open source, and we sit where we sit so that we can make sure that the voice of the customer is being brought when we're designing new things. So if we're adding a feature, if we're fixing a bug, we're going to escalate certain ones higher than others because they have a greater impact on the community or the customers. We monitor the Power of Us hub to make sure that any errors in the product that happen to get released, bugs, etc., are dealt with and escalated properly. So we're not customer service, but we kind of do some customer service things. We're not doc writers, but we do some doc writing things. We're not developers, but we do some developer things. We're unique. And
so if we had a hashtag, it would be hashtag all the things. Because
all the things.
The way we try to describe it when we're introducing new people onboarding into our team or into the larger tech and product team is we're like the hub on a wheel, right? We connect all these points together and we make sure that things are running smoothly, and that's my short answer.
So you said it's open source. So Jace, does that mean you are physically taking the specs from the customer?
Sometimes. In general, that's basically the product manager's role, but I facilitate conversations like that. So if you're in the Power of Us hub, you know about ideas, you know about the group. So a lot of people have questions, a lot of people field ideas. And so most of the time what I'm doing is I'm interacting with those ideas to make sure that they're common and core to the EDA platform. And then I work with our product manager to kind of work those into our backlog.
So just for people who may be listening, who may be relatively new to Salesforce ecosystem, what is the Power of Us hub?
Excellent question again. The Power of Us hub is a community for our nonprofit and education community of partners, SI partners or consultants, and users. So if you have anything to do with the nonprofit or educational community, if you're a user of the package, if you're a consultant who helps install the packages, or if you're a partner building apps for the App Exchange that have to do with the community, you can access the hub. Think of it like the Trailblazers community, but just for those sectors.
Just for those verticals, the nonprofit and education.
It's a place where you can get answers, provide answers, and make connections.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. There is an amazing video that you should perhaps link out to that it was filmed last year at one of our open source community sprints in Orlando, Florida. And it is a video that sort of describes what the hub is, because the hub is kind of hard to get unless you're in the hub, unless you know what it is. But it's a safe space. It's someplace where you don't feel, or you shouldn't feel stupid asking any questions. There's no stupid questions. People rely on each other. We share articles, we share blogs, we share in all of the amazing achievements.
Cat pictures.
The what, sorry?
Cat pictures.
Yes, GIFs, all kinds of things get shared.
Non-profit cats, though.
Non-profit cats.
But the for-profit cats aren't allowed in the Power of Us hub.
No. You have to be a nonprofit or educational cat only. But yeah, it's a great space for people to come and talk and just be a part of the community.
What's cool about it too is that it's not just a place for conversations around technology. Like, I think as a customer, I just assumed it was going to be another space where I could go in and hopefully get some questions answered, or hopefully connect with people specific to, my experiences in higher education. But this is a place where conversations get sparked all the time. And so it's not just about technology, it's about connecting people to people and being human beings and having honest, vulnerable conversations as well. So kind of meets all these different needs across this human spectrum, the 360-degree spectrum.
It's true. The Power of Us Hub community really got me started on my path in Salesforce because there are so many people in there you can ask questions of. There's groups, there's support networks. And I used to work for an ISV partner, and the community was so supportive. It helped me get my original certificate, so my admin certificate. There are study groups on there. And Amplify is a private group that Jason and I know quite a bit about and have been involved with quite a bit over the years. And it's sort of the nonprofit education community's Women in Tech group. So very specific to that vertical. And Jace, you maybe want to speak a little bit more about them, but such an amazing group. I've traveled to do volunteer work on behalf of that group. And like I said, they have amazing study groups. And that's not really something you find in the Trailblazer community. Obviously, there are study groups and user groups are represented there, but this one's just a little bit special.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that, but I got to get this plug in because it always makes me laugh. Not only am I the vice president of Amplify, but I'm also a member. So what? Sorry, I had to. So
I'm a little concerned you said that, considering you're wearing a hat.
Yeah, true. So what Amplify is Amplify has been around a long time. It used to be under the title of Girl Force, but then it rebranded last year to Amplify. But basically what Amplify is, it is a nonprofit advancing empowerment through education and community. And it specifically targets underrepresented voices in the Salesforce ecosystem. Thanks, Joni. Sorry, that was my wife. So examples
who started Amplify. We'll just put that in.
Who started Amplify. In fact, I should right back. We can have a conversation. So yeah, Joni is the founder of Amplify, and Marisa Lopez is the president. But when we talk about what an underrepresented voice is, a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about what that is. And so Amplify specifically aligns itself around people of color, transgender people, non-binary people, anyone that's part of the LGBTQIA spectrum, anyone that's differently abled, neurodiverse, and identifies as a woman. So it's an exceptional group. Every year at Dreamforce, there's Amplify at Dreamforce Breakfast. There's conversations that we just had at the Higher Ed Summit 19 in San Diego last week where we were talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity. There's just a lot of good conversations happening in that group. There's also a Partner in Accomplices group. So for anyone that feels that they still want to have a conversation around what it means to support these voices, then those Partners in Accomplice group is where most of those conversations are happening. So it's a pretty unique group. Sure. Oh, thanks for calling that out, Corey. It is weareamplified.org. And so if you want to get involved, feel free to visit the website. There's all sorts of information around our board. You can find out our board members, our events that are happening. You can have access to our blogs, and you can contact us. There's tons of volunteers opportunities. But again, you can find us in the Power of Us Hub as well.
And you'll find that link as well as the link to the video that Corey mentioned earlier in the show notes.
Okay. That's just one example of something so beautiful and amazing that comes out of the Power of Us Hub. And really what we always try and say is if you're in the nonprofit or education vertical and you're not yet in the Power of Us Hub, go to the Power of Us Hub, sign up for it, and join, because it's different, it's awesome, and we have a huge representation of our open source community there. We have groups and topics dedicated to open source and our products, and all of the sprints that we do. We like to say that the sprints are sort of the in-person Power of Us Hub event. So it is run by salesforce.org, so we actually put the events on. And the community comes and contributes into the community again. So I would love to talk a little bit about what we do there, because they're really special.
Oh yeah, no, it's a great segue. Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say no. You're so nice, Mark.
We don't care about your stupid events.
Who are you people? What are you doing in my pocket?
Yeah, so but like I said before, and I know I haven't given you a proper intro of who I am and what I do, but I used to work, I've been in the Salesforce space since 2010, worked for an ISV partner who created an app for nonprofits to do credit card processing, and got involved with the sprints what we call our open source community sprint events. When they first started up again as more of a community-led effort by Judy Sohn in 2015. And at the time, these community events were sort of launching, and you can kind of think of them like a hackathon. So that's a term that's very well known in the developer community, in the open source community. And they started in 2015. They were a 2-day event where the community came free of charge, picked a different city. The first one was in Seattle. I'm from Vancouver, Canada, so that's partly why my company sent me, because it was close to home. And it was new, and we're sort of like, what's going to happen? No one really knew in the community, but the company that I worked for previously was very much involved in the Salesforce nonprofit community. And so I was encouraged to go. And I am so thankful that I was able to attend that event, because it really sparked my love for the open source community that I didn't really appreciated, existing before then. So it was a 2-day event. The very first sprint was about 30 people. We got together to contribute back into the products. And I was familiar with the nonprofit Success Pack product. At that time, the educational products were not included yet. So this was a standalone nonprofit Success Pack sprint. And we got together and just worked. There was some developers there. There's non-developers, just users, admins, consultant partners, ISV partners, and we just got together and did whatever we felt like working on. So it was an unconference event. They're unstructured. We sort of brainstorm and figure out what we want to do when we're there. And I worked on a document, and that document has since been contributed into the community to help people with whatever the document was about. I kind of forget at the moment, to be honest. There's been so many sprints and so many documents that I worked on. But that event really kicked off what we now have as our open source community sprints ecosystem. We have combined the NGO and the education verticals together. What started as a 30-person sprint has now graduated to 150 people events. We do 3 of those in North America a year, and we do 1 in EMEA, or the European area. They're incredible events where just the most amazing things happen. It's completely up to the attendees of the sprint, what they're going to work on. And we have some really neat processes in place to kind of spark ideas and innovation. And they're just amazing.
So I know that Corey had highlighted the fact that so higher ed's, hadn't traditionally sprinted. Like if people like Corey Snow were to attend an NPSP event, it was again always around NGO product. And back in 2017 was the first sprint that we ever had, and it was at Harvard, which is why I'm wearing my Harvard hat today. And so with that, we benefited from the model that the NGO community had basically created around sprints. And we ended up having, I want to say, almost 90 participants. And we had customers, we had partners, we had some K through 12 folks. And we even had a student, Jonikel Soto, who showed up and basically just contributed to the conversations we were having and started, hammering away on Trailhead. And I still follow Jonikel on Twitter, who, I think Jonikel has more badges than I do at this point on Trailhead. Go Jonikel. But anyway, it's just been impressive that after that experience, the conversation was like, why are we doing these separately? Because HEDA was built based on the concept of NGO. So why wouldn't we want to bring these two communities together to, basically strategize and think bigger and utilize all this amazing brain power and collaboration and contribution, and it worked, and it's consistently worked. As Corey said, our numbers continue to go up, and the community just really. It's hard to describe this. Corey said it earlier. It's hard to describe unless you're actually attending, but just this collaboration that happens, and we do mindfulness sessions at the beginning to kind of get us in the headspace and getting us ready to collaborate, and really what that means, and understanding that there is no stupid question, there is no stupid discussion, that even if whether you're an admin or a developer or just an end user or just someone that's got a thought or an opinion, like you're valued, you're welcome, it's a safe space, please contribute, please be part of it, while drinking a lot of coffee and eating a lot of good food. So yeah. And also got to get a shout out to our sponsors, which are our partners that provide for a lot of these activities, as well as the dinner that we all end up having on the first night of the sprint. So it's pretty cool stuff.
It's hard to pin down because there's so many elements to a sprint. Mm-hmm. Depending on, is it your first sprint? Have you been to 10 sprints before? Are you a developer? Are you an admin? Are you there for networking? Are you there to just be in your community? A lot of our sprint attendees work from home, or they don't live in an area where there's user groups necessarily. So these 4 times a year events, or 3 times in North America, are their way to get out in the community and see people in real life and have dinner and talk and share ideas and have fun and go bowling or whatever our activity is. So that's one element of a sprint. It's lovey-dovey, and there's so much respect and mutual sharing of ideas and support and encouragement and learning. That's another aspect to it. There's technical enablement. We just added a half day this year. When we started, the first sprint was in Long Beach a couple months ago. We did a half day hands-on training in sort of the old Dreamforce style of Cumulus CI, which is our open source release management tooling, or continuous integration tooling that's been developed by Salesforce.org, our release engineering team. So it's an open source product that we want our community to utilize. So we have been giving some training on that. But yeah, you name it and it happens at a sprint. Lovey-dovey to technical training. It's all there.
There's all sorts of things that get worked on too. It's not just code, or documentation. If any of you have seen online on YouTube, I believe there's a whole series of videos that are oriented around explaining NPSP. That is the NPSP videography project. Those always get scripted, and some of them get recorded at the sprints.
Yep, 100% actually get recorded at the sprint. Okay. And that actually, so that's a really interesting thing that's happened with our sprints over the past couple of years, is we've seen the community has always been contributing back into the community. It always has been. One of the ways that that's been happening is by our community project team called NPSP Videography. So they release something like 10 to 12 short how-to videos per year.
And they're not employees.
Not employees of Salesforce.
Yeah.
And .com or .org. They are 100% volunteers, and they just honestly love making videos and improving the documentation and the user experience for our product, for NPSP, specifically the Nonprofit Success Pack. So that's been happening for years and years and years, and it's just incredible. But since the sprints have started, we have seen other groups forming, and we're calling them community project teams. There's one, it's an app-based team. So they've developed an app called Outbound Funds. And they, as a group that started at a sprint, I think it was the Chicago sprint in 2016 or 17, and they just realized that the existing Nonprofit Success Pack didn't have outbound fund functionality or outbound granting functionality. If you're getting a grant, there are objects and features set up for you to track that. But if you're giving them, there wasn't. They decided at a sprint to map that out. What would that look like if they built some objects? What kind of automation would they need? What would they need? There's a lot of Dreamforce presentations. There's a lot of information out there on outbound funds, but fast forward 3 years, they now have a managed package in the community, completely open source, completely volunteer run, and customers can now install it if they're looking for that functionality. So that's an example of something where Salesforce.org was not going down a path to implement a particular feature for whatever reason. And the community said, that's fine. We're going to build it anyway, and we're going to release it, and we're going to manage it ourselves.
Would that .com had groups doing that sort of thing as well? I mean, you often get, individual people who then later often become employees who work on, some crazy functionality like that doesn't exist, like declarative lookup rollup summaries done by Andrew Fawcett, done by Andrew Fawcett. So there's things like that, but there's not usually teams. That's great that they can have that kind of concerted effort.
Yeah, and So one of the things that we've recognized is that these teams have been forming naturally in the nonprofit and educational space. There's one called Interactions that Jace might want to speak to a little bit more. They used to be called Interactions for Student Recruitment, and they're going through a process now of becoming a community team as well. And all of this has Jace and myself and our director, Judy, have been sort of watching this happen from our respective positions in the community for years. And over the last year, we have been developing a framework to sort of support and help these community teams along. We can't really share a whole lot of information about it yet. We haven't gone live yet, but the program that we've designed is called Open Source Commons. And its purpose is to support and enable projects that are sustainable and that they solve the long-term needs of the community, as well as meeting our standards for quality development and project management. So what we're trying to avoid is all of these amazing ideas that are done and maybe started by one person. And let's say there's a really great idea out there. One person does it. One person builds an app for it. One person puts it out there in the community and customers start installing it. Well, what happens if that one person wins the lottery and moves to an island with no internet?
Or joins Salesforce itself.
Right. Or joins Salesforce.
Same thing, right?
Right.
You just won the lottery and went someplace with no internet.
Right. Or what if their life changes? They get a new job, they have a baby, they get a dog, or whatever the thing is in your life that causes you to be distracted from that project or that app that you just built. What happens to the customers that are using it? We've seen this countless times where amazing ideas are abandoned, and we wanted to make sure that we could put something together to support the ones that have a lot of potential and that have made a commitment to not doing that. And so that's what Open Source Commons is kind of all about. And there are some strict requirements to joining our program, because not every app is going to be appropriate for our program. For example, you have to have, it can't be one person. You have to have at least 3 people on the team from 3 different organizations. There's things like that, and we'll be launching more information about what those requirements are and what the program entails soon. So watch this space, watch the hub.
I was going to say, which space are you referring to?
The Power of Us hub.
And I was going to say, too, just to kind of piggyback on what Corey was saying, where we don't want these community efforts to just kind of dissolve and fade away. So Corey mentioned Interactions, and there's another group, Enterprise Application Solution for Yield. So both of those projects came around based on a Salesforce Force for Change grant. So how that works is people apply for these grants, they get awarded a grant, and then there's a time limit, right? And at some point, just like any project, the funding runs out. So what do you do at that point when there's a lot of people using the solutions and they're engaging with you and the Power of Us Hub? These specific projects have groups in there. So what happens when that grant money runs out? So the idea behind the open source common is that, like Corey said, this is not new. We're just putting a name around this. We're actually putting a program around it now because it's been happening. So those 2 projects are in the process of identifying the strategy for becoming a sustainable open source project. So who's going to be engaging? Who is going to be responding? Who's going to be focusing on addressing any issues that come up in the community from a long-standing point? Because if you're a customer or a partner and you're implementing a solution, you want to make sure it's not a fly-by-night type of a thing. You want to know that there is going to be some trust and transparency wrapped around it. One of the open source projects that actually started with the first Higher Ed Sprint 2017 was called Object Merge, and this actually started as an idea for HITA. The architecture formerly known as HITA. We need to get a symbol. I feel like we need to make a symbol. But anyway,
like a bat symbol?
Merge, like a bat symbol, yeah, except a bat symbol with, I don't know what we can...
Something that will fit well on a floodlight that you can aim up into the sky.
That symbol with a mortar board is wearing on its head.
Mortar board. So Object Merge started at the first higher ed sprint back in 2017 at Harvard, and it actually first started as an idea. So if you're familiar with the Power of Us Hub, if you have an idea around one of our products, whether it's Education Data Architecture, MPSP, or Volunteers for Salesforce, you can log in. You can actually log an idea, right? And so our product teams, including the open source community managers, review those. So there was a submission, like I want to say it was almost, I think, about a year after EDA came out, and it was around the need to figure out a way to merge all these objects. And so during that first sprint for higher education, there was some community members that got together and said, well, hey, one of the things we could really focus on is looking at this idea. And so maybe what we could do is we can get together and kind of spec out the requirements, figure out how to make it work. And that's exactly what that project team did. And you can find Object Merge in GitHub, and it's a free solution. And it basically is used for merging Salesforce objects and their related objects. And it's not just around contacts, which was originally the idea, but it basically turned into an object agnostic solution for both standard and custom objects. So that's just one idea that started literally as an idea in the Power of Us Hub. It moved into a sprint, it got worked on, and then it actually got delivered the next year, day one of Dreamforce, which was pretty cool. But Kyle also is working to find members of the community willing to help sustain that project, so Kyle can move Object Merge into the open source commons. So it's really neat to actually see this progression of how the community, again, the democratization of community-led technology starts in the hub, but it also starts because they actually have access to technology that allows them to build on top of this platform. So,
oh, now you post your intro, Corey. Now.
Now that we're halfway through, we're going to introduce to you Corey O'Brien.
I figured you could
introduce Corey.
You can record it on your own time.
So there is one of these sprints coming up, right?
It is. Yes.
Where's that? When is that?
It is in Detroit.
Detroit.
Detroit. I'm Canadian, so I say it weird. I know that.
No, say it again. I have someone who's moving there. I would love to get him convinced that's how you pronounce it.
Detroit.
Detroit.
Detroit. All right. So it's in Detroit. It goes from Wednesday, July 10th to Friday, July 12th. It's actually a 2-day sprint with a optional half-day add-on at the beginning. So July 10th, which just happens to be my birthday, by the way.
Well, happy birthday, July.
In July. Thank
Detroit.
you. Yes, thank you. So that's the day we're doing the hands-on training. So we do that in the afternoon, Cumulus CI training. And then on the 11th and 12th is the actual sprint. And we have a lovely FAQ document that Jason and I curate for every sprint, and registration is now open.
And where would they go to register?
It's in Eventbrite. We'll give you the link to post, but if you go into Eventbrite or Google search salesforce.org open source community sprint Detroit. If you're in the Power of Us Hub, you can also find our group. We have a group that we use to share all the information. It's called Open Source Community Sprints. And you can follow Jason and I on Twitter. We talk about it all the time. And that's where we love to share the most cat gifts, by the way.
So Detroit is kind of like my next door neighbor. I mean, granted, there's a Great Lake in the way between me and Detroit.
Sure. But and those are small, right?
Yeah, those are really small.
Yeah,
the puddle jumps.
Yeah.
But I'm not in the nonprofit world. I got a couple nonprofit customers, but that's it. So am I invited to go to one of these sprints?
Well, great question. You just mentioned you have a couple of customers. So perhaps, yes. So how do you know if you should attend a sprint or not? We have that question in the FAQ. Basically, if you're a developer, if you're an admin, if you've used any of the .org products before, we want you to come to the sprint. We want you to contribute. You don't have to be a developer by far. We have a lot of user people that come to the sprints that are users in their org, and they are able to contribute in amazing ways because a lot of user stories are gathered at sprints. people that are, say, developing a component to do X, Y, and Z at the sprint want your experience. They want your unique perspective and your org's perspective. So we have a big section in the FAQ about who should attend. There is a footnote about who maybe won't want to attend, and that really just sort of focuses on Salesforce experience and just no real interest in the nonprofit or the educational community. So if you are a crackerjack Salesforce developer, but you don't have nonprofit or educational experience, you can come and you can give your Salesforce technical experience to a project, but you'll want to familiarize yourself a little bit with the products and the use cases of the nonprofit educational community. So if you know nothing about Salesforce at all, full stop, this isn't the right event for you.
I'll be really surprised if they're listening.
Right, exactly. But if you, Brian, for example, just aren't really super familiar with the nonprofit or educational community, but you know a ton about Salesforce, especially if you're a developer, yes, come. Because the teams that'll be using, that will be able to use your talents will just need an Apex developer, or they'll need someone to QA, or they'll need someone to build a component. So those types of skills are vastly wanted at the sprint. If you're a developer and raise your hand, basically you'll be pulled in 8 different directions.
I would say too, even if you don't know NPSP or EDA now or Volunteers for Salesforce, but you want to get involved, hit up Trailhead, get yourself a DE org, go out to GitHub, do the install, go through the documentation, get yourself familiar, because if you don't make it this time, you might make it to the next one. So just familiarizing yourself around those things. And there's so many artifacts. I felt very Indiana Jones when I said that, but a lot of artifacts out there that's community created, that's .org created. And again, it all centers around a lot of the information that's accessible in the Power of Us Hub, but just get familiar with the product. Doesn't mean you can't come in the future.
And you certainly don't need to be an expert in these products either. Like if you know enough, like you set up NPSP once or twice, that's more experience than a lot of people have.
Yep,
definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a professional doc writer. Just come and experience it. We host 3 a year in North America, and we vary those. So 1 West, 1 Central, 1 East. We try and go to new places. We also try and go to places that will really highlight the local community. So come, but we have a ton of sprint veterans, we call them, that fly wherever we put the sprint. So they just come to all the sprints, which is amazing.
And I was going to say, if you're an introvert, we also have a lot of opportunities to address aligning you with people prior to attending a sprint. So we give these virtual opportunities for meet and greets. We do some pretty cool icebreakers. I know that probably makes a lot of folks cringe thinking about an icebreaker, but it's
mentor
just
program.
Mentor programs. We have a lot of opportunity for first-time sprinters, just so they feel connected and acclimated. They get to know our community, because there's nothing stranger, right? I can imagine walking into Dreamforce. I was that person, not knowing a whole lot of people, but this type of a community really wants to get to know each one of its sprinters, whether you're the first time or the 50th time.
Yeah. So come to our sprint. We're in Detroit in July, and then we are in Philadelphia in October. Follow the Hub group, follow Jason and I on Twitter, and you'll hear more about when that one goes on. Registration will be going out in July for that one.
Come to our sprints. We're excited to have you. We're excited to be part of this community. Thank you so much for having us on the podcast, for allowing us to reach a larger audience. And again, don't feel confined by where you are currently in your knowledge. Work to getting to that point. We're here for you, and we're excited to see you at a future sprint.
I do have a question for Jace. First off, actually I have 2. But we'll do the serious one first.
Okay, let me get my serious
I was told that you have some involvement in this potential mascot for the nonprofit that involves a dinosaur of some sort. First, is that true?
Half. It's actually more on the education side, but then because we're all sprinting, it's now actually around it was actually more around our entire sprint community. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Follow-up question then, Jace. Why did you come to the podcast without wearing your dinosaur suit?
Well, to be honest with you,
because I really could use a nice episode artwork
Yeah, well, I thought about it, but to be honest with you, those costumes are hot. Have you ever been in one of them? Because they give you this little fan, and the fan is like the size of like my palm, and it's barely going off any batteries, and so it gets really, really hot. So in the past, when I would go to sprints, or I think it was in Higher Ed Summit 2017 in Austin was when I made a debut. I'll have to give you the YouTube video. Amy Panu made that. It's pretty funny. But it's so hot, and so I could really I have no idea outside of the dinosaur videos where people are out in the snow. Makes perfect sense, you could live in Alaska and that you wouldn't even need like a parka, but they're so hot. And the funny part is it was at Summit in Austin in 2017 that my batteries fell out. So let me tell you what that was like. That was horrible. So I'm walking through the Quad Expo, and all of a sudden the fan starts going out. And like what a shrink-wrapped potato looks like inside a microwave? That started happening in my body. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And I remember hollering out to Ann Duperalt, who was a partner at the time, I believe, with Huron. And I was like, Ann, my batteries fell out. I'm dying. And she just laughs at me. She's like, oh, Jace. And I was like, no, really, I'm dying. That's why, because I think I had a very triggering effect when my batteries fell out.
So, lessons learned, Jace is dead. This is his ghost we're talking to.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the second question, which is really a promise from the previous episode. Mm-hmm. And that is, what is with the 2 first names?
Well, actually, I can tell you about the 3 first names. So the last name was my father's name. The middle name was my mother's maiden name. And the first name is my chosen name. Let's see. If you're familiar with the HEDA Trailhead, that was actually me. It was me prior to transition. So I'm a transgender male.
You wrote it? You wrote the HEDA Trailhead?
No. Did I just say that? Sorry, no. Salesforce, the Salesforce.org documentation team created that trailhead. But I was part of that. I was in the videos. And so yeah, that was me pre-transition. And so I chose my first name. Which again, I chose my pronouns are he, him. And so again, one of the reasons why I amplify underrepresented voices, because I too am one of them. So that's kind of a little backstory as to how that all happened.
You know what I love about this podcast sometimes? How I ask an absolutely ridiculous, stupid question, primarily as a carry forward joke from a previous episode, and partly to make fun of Mark. And I get an incredible, valid, and interesting answer. Which makes me feel really, really small and stupid. But at the same time, that's amazing.
There's a lot of stories I don't think many people can connect the dots to, because most people, when they hear about that dinosaur, they're like, well, how the hell did that happen? And it actually started at Summit in New Orleans in 2016 when I was still a customer, and I did a session on Jurassic Reports. And so I made this joke that one day I was going to come back in a T-Rex costume, because that was when it was starting to get big. And so it just kind of happened that way. It just evolved. And then so I just kind of carried forward that into a couple sprints. So
it's funny how that works. I mean,
yep.
I dressed up as a wizard covered in Salesforce logos right about the same time Visual Force came out. And
I remember.
That became that thing. And then, of course, there's Ryan Headley in his lion suit.
Have you guys seen Ryan Headley in the lion suit?
No, I have not seen that. I have to see that.
Ryan Headley really owns the lion suit. And
no, not anymore. He gave it away.
No, you don't understand. I have a backup for him, waiting for him to pick him up. Because I had accidentally forgot that one at the house. So I overnight ordered another one for him to wear at Midwest Streaming.
It was an incentive for something, some sort of contest.
So, yeah. So I'm the Salesforce wizard. Jace is the Salesforce T-Rex, and Ryan Headley is Salesforce Lion.
And that was before he actually joined .org, which now has the Lionheart Astro dressed in a lion suit.
Ooh,
wizard, T-Rexes, lions. Oh my!
We've actually taken the Lionheart, Astro Lionheart, and we're putting him into our open source commons logoing. None of that's finished yet. It's all still being drafted out. But yeah, that's funny. I've never seen him in that costume, and now I can't wait.
Well, if you want to see Ryan in the costume again, and you're on Twitter, you should absolutely mention him at Life with Ryan, RYAN, and let him know that you want to see Lion Ryan. Lion with an ION, obviously. And,
Ryan, love
it. And you need some dress up. And if he ever asks, well, where am I getting a costume? Just let him know the wizard has a spare for him.
Will do.
I'm gonna gonna hit him up and quip after this podcast.
That's what he gets for not showing up for the
happen.
local user groups anymore.
I'll let him know that too.
So do you guys have any other questions for us?
I've run out of questions. Yeah, actually, I was going to ask questions, Corey, and you just went right into the thing that I was about to ask you about multiple times.
We
So-
like guests that do our job for us
Okay. Good.
because we do it terribly, and inevitably the guests do it better.
No.
I could go back to the forbidden questions email list.
What?
No.
No, Brian. We said we were never going to ask from the forbidden list.
My understanding is that the open source book is really the Book of the Dead. Can you expand on that?
Well, according to the Necronomicon, you might not be far off.
I can't remember the phrase now. It's not Klaatu Barada Nikto, is it? That's
It's pretty darn close.
is that
That
it?
is.
No,
It's
that's the day the earth stood still.
No,
Oh,
no.
that is. No,
No,
that
I think
is.
it's both.
Is it both?
And
Is
of course,
it
if we
really
get it
both?
wrong, then the book just stays open, and
I
the
feel like you're all
Deadites come and
summoning
get
a
us.
portal, and you should probably all just stop at this point.
Oh man, I
Cthulhu Patagan, Cthulhu Patagan.
Oh my God.
If we say Beetlejuice a couple more times, that's all I'm saying.
We actually have a Twitter hashtag that we created for Long Beach called, SFDO Sprint Quote, where we, every sprint that we have, we do a feedback survey and we ask for quotes. Hey, give us a quote if you want to talk about the sprint. And we shared a ton of those out before Long Beach to drive registration. And there is some incredible sprint quotes that came out of that. And one of our favorites, there was actually too many to choose. I had to shorten them a lot, but they would rather attend one of our sprints than Dreamforce. And in the Salesforce community, we think that's a pretty big thing.
can understand that.
Yeah.
I can absolutely understand, especially with the way Dreamforce has become over the last few years.
Yeah, it's a lot more sales oriented for sure.
Yeah.
The sprints
And
are
that's not a knock against Salesforce. It's just a whole different animal now.
Totally. Yeah. And what the sprints are the community element that you would get out of Dreamforce, or what we used to get out of Dreamforce, but in a much smaller bite-sized piece, which is nice. Oh yeah.
And the link we have a hashtag SFDO Sprint. So if anyone's interested in following along, even if they can't attend the sprint, they can follow us on Twitter and they can, give feedback, give us hearts, give us gifts, memes, whatever.
So
Like
is it safe to say, Corey, that your community sprints is bigger than Dreamforce?
I would say yes.
I mean, that was the downfall of the Beatles. So
No, well, they're tiny in comparison. I can't even believe Dreamforce is so big nowadays. It's insane. But I think it's all the best parts of Dreamforce pulled out and put into one little community event.
It would be like if you could take all of Dreamforce and put it in the West End.
well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy Mondays,
Yeah.
telling us a little bit more about the open source and the community sprints, as well as I learned some new acronyms now with TNP and CCE and ABCKY. And
There'll be a test.
WizardCast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, conspiracy theories by the Lizard People, and our intern this episode was Arabella David.
Yeah, I'm just going to let that go. You can be an intern too. Just follow us at WizardCast_pod on Twitter.
You can also take photos with us and share them on social media to get added to the list.
If you have a joke, interview suggestion, or other comments, you can let us know. Call or leave a voice recording at 608-492-0321 or email wizardcast@thewizardnews.com.
Seriously, we need to hear from you folks, especially with jokes, because Mark is getting so tired of my jokes. Other ways you can participate is if you had a question that you would like us to ask Parker Harris, what would it be?
Submit a question by going to bit.ly/ParkerQuestions, all lowercase, and fill out our short form.
Have you seen an idea on the Idea Exchange and go, I wonder what Mark and Brian think about that? Or, wow, I wish more people knew about that. Well, you can submit that idea to us, and we will talk about it on our next Idea Exchange highlight.
which admittedly won't be for a while, but we'll still have it tracked in our database for when we actually do talk about it. Go to bit.ly/idea highlight to submit that idea to us.
Well, if people really like it and we get tons and tons of submissions, we might do one a little bit sooner than
That's
what
true.
we originally planned.
That's true.
Don't forget, you can subscribe to the WizardCast and receive our next episode automatically.
And please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, and share this episode around. It helps others to hear what you just had to endure.
Once again, I'm Brian.
And I'm...
Thanks for listening. What was that?
What was what?
Do you think lizard people actually talk in personal tongue?
I mean, what else would they speak in?
And isn't that specific to steaks?
Steaks?
Snakes?
Steaks?
Snakes?
That explains why the meat hisses every time I cut into it.
Oh, dear.